I watched the Netflix documentary. I think it was a documentary on Rob Ford yesterday. And I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know if it was going to be an exaggeration of a figure, a public figure who some could say was an exaggeration himself. Rob Ford was one of the early going populists who rose through the ranks and became mayor of Toronto in the early 20-teens. And like a lot of these populists, he has a backstory. I mean, you don't turn out to be Rob Ford for no reason. Everybody comes from somewhere. Everybody is the product of everything that they've ever experienced, every decision they've ever made, every person they've ever crossed paths with. And so Rob Ford is no different. And I think, after watching it, it became apparent that it was, at least I think, a fairly fair-minded representation of the Ford years in power. I can understand why his brother Doug, the Premier of Ontario, views it as a hatchet job. But I think that's got more to do with the fact that that it exists at all. I mean, Doug Ford was Rob Ford's older brother. He was at his side for almost this entire time that Rob was mayor. In fact, Doug Ford was a city councillor in Toronto at the same time. So in a lot of the clips where you see Rob, you see Doug in the background, and I have to think that Doug was probably Rob's closest advisor, perhaps even closest friend. But you have to remember that they both had a similar home experience, and I'm not trying to suggest that this is these guys turn out the way they are because of an overbearing father or an overbearing mother, or perhaps both. But as I said, these people they don't just come out of a box like this. They we get to where we are because of the journey that got us there, and that journey becomes more of who we are than the end destination often is. So anyways, I followed the Ford story while it was happening. And of course, I, as a citizen of Canada, a citizen of Ontario, I have to admit to being a little embarrassed by the fact that we had what I considered to be a bit of a yahoo in the office of our largest metropolitan area. So, I mean, the mayor of Toronto is a big deal. Toronto is the third largest city in North America. So being the mayor of that city is a pretty big deal. And there's no denying the things that happened while Rob Ford was in office. And I don't mind saying this. And that's why I think the documentary was fair-minded, because Rob Ford, at the end of the day, he admitted to all of these things. He admitted to the drinking, he admitted to the crack cocaine, he admitted to to some of the other unsavory behaviors that he would demonstrate in his day-to-day doings. I mean, this was a guy who handed out his business card to just about everybody he met. It's funny, his brother kind of did this as he was just premier. And the idea was that if you ever have a problem, if you're having a problem with City Hall, if you're having a problem with anything to do with the city, just give me a call. And yeah, I'll pick up your call, and yeah, I'll actually take up your cause for you. This is a mayor who delivered a pizza because he went into, or not a pizza, but a submarine sandwich, because he went into Mr. Sub to get a sub. And he was talking to the guy, and the guy that owned the sub shop said that they were understaffed that night. And so Ford asked, well, okay, can I help you out? Can I deliver that sub for you? And the guy said, sure. So here you've got the mayor of Toronto knocking on your door with your sub. I don't know what kind of tip he might have got. I think the people answering the door, if they even recognized who was delivering their sub for them, were probably having too much of a moment to even consider tipping the mayor. Not that the mayor needs to be tipped anyways, because he comes from a family of meats, but nevertheless, it's these kind of things. But then again, there are other things too, where he would show up drunk at public events and make a horse's ass of himself. he's another one of these guys that, man of the people, and they're here to to drain the swamp, which is a popular way of putting it, to basically chase away all the people who are either mismanaging the city of Toronto or making it their own personal little kingdom. And Rob sort of styled himself, and Doug does as well, as the everyman, right? They'll use the word folks a lot. Now, Doug uses folks a lot, whereas Rob was more of a buddy guy. And anytime he talked to you, it was like, hey, buddy, how's it going, buddy? Thank you, buddy. Despite my embarrassment, you have to understand that you're looking at something. You're looking at a human being here. You're looking at somebody's dad. You're looking at somebody's brother. You're looking at somebody's husband. And there is a measure of humanity that has to be part of that lens through which you're looking. And so that's really important to do when you're looking at a story like this. Now, I mean, make no mistake, Rob Ford was a world-class blowhard, no doubt about it. He was the kind of in-your-face kind of guy, both physically because of the sheer size of the man and personality. And we have to cut him a little bit of slack because Rob, like everybody else, had a chip on his shoulder, and I think a lot of the bluster and bravado actually was a compensation for the reality that he was probably a very deeply insecure individual. And I'm not saying that as if that's something that it doesn't happen very often. Because I could say that I share the same trait, and I could also say that a lot of us share that same trait, where what we project to the world is sort of gives us cover from the reality that exists inside. And I can't tell you how many politicians that I've been around where they're gregarious. They'll stand in front of the microphone and they'll talk in front of a room of 600 people, 1,000 people, no problem. You're looking at the guy and you're wondering, holy smokes, how can you do that so easily? How do you make that look so easy? And yet, at the end of the event in the car afterwards and on the ride home, you can't get 2 words out of the guy. He won't even look at you because he's a world-class introvert. And you're sitting there in the car wondering, holy smokes, what did I say? What did I do? Or what did I not say? What did I not do that I was supposed to say or do? And it's just the nature of the beast. And I find that happens quite often, where you've got these people that just do not relate well one-on-one or one-on-two or in small group situations. But then you stick them up in front of a crowd and it's like God reached down and touched them with gold dust. And so I think Rob Ford had a little bit of that in him as well. So often when we're insecure, we overcompensate with excessive bravado, bombast, things of that nature. And Rob Ford was all of that. And as I said, this wasn't a National Enquirer hit piece on Rob Ford. It's not like, I was worried that when I showed up, was I going to be like somebody checking out a car accident? Everybody slows down and rubbernecks the car accident. And I didn't want to be ghoulish like that. I lived through the experience. I saw the seedier side of what was going on. But, I also saw something else. And by the way, the documentary wasn't like that at all. As I said, about as fair-minded as you can get when you're talking about an individual who was embarrassing to himself, embarrassing to the city, embarrassing to the rest of us who had to watch this happening right in our own backyard. But I can say this, after watching it, all of us have within us our own personal truths. And I can also say that there is nothing more sobering, nothing more humbling, nothing that cuts you down to the quick more or faster than our mortality. And when you see towards the end of this documentary, when Ford was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a very aggressive cancer and a very difficult to treat cancer, you see a different side of him. He becomes much more quieter, much more reflective, much more apologetic, much more human. And the documentary, as far as I'm concerned, becomes a tragedy. this is a tragic story of a human being who, for whatever reason, grew to where he, ended up where he ended up in a position of power, in a position of influence. And whatever demons were inside of him wrestled him to the ground, even as cancer was busy wrestling him to the ground. Now, of course, Rob Ford died of cancer in 2016, I believe. But that was after he was actually had all his powers taken away from him by council. They had the deputy mayor almost assume the position of mayor instead of him. So he was like a declawed, a defanged wolf, if you will. And it's sad. I mean, you've got a guy who was at the top of the mountain there, and all of a sudden, like a lot of the Greek tragedies where you've got the hero, 1 minute you're a hero and the next minute you're the goat. And, this is a sad story. When he's talking to the camera and he's fully aware of his mortality and he's fully aware of the fact that he's only got so much time left to live, and it's not a lot, you see the emotion in the man. You see how, like, when you're faced with your life and death, when you're faced with the impending reality of your final days, I guess bombast and truculence and all of those things become less important, and you sort of left with yourself and the real you, the truthful you. And I mean, he becomes so much more softer. I mean, there was a point there where a reporter asked a simple question. She said, "Mr. Ford, how are you doing today?" And you could tell that it struck him emotionally, and he actually, and very quietly, he said, "I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. It was very kind of you to ask how I was doing." And that's heartbreaking. I know that there's that whole notion of how the mighty fall, and the higher you get, the farther you can fall, and that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean that you're going to sit back and cheer or applaud when you see a human being basically self-destruct like this. When you see the mayor of Toronto being ridiculed by American talk show hosts, and actually in one case he was actually on the show as a guest of the show, and essentially being ridiculed right to his face and laughing along with it because, you're with Jimmy Kimmel or you're with Stephen Colbert, or I forget which one it was, but, these guys are giants in the industry. I'm just the mayor of Toronto, right? So, that can't be easy. No matter what our life story is, we all have pride. We all have some spark inside of us that wants to advocate for ourselves, that wants to lift up ourselves from whatever it is that we feel is holding us down. And this story on Netflix is just basically a representation of that struggle that existed within this man. I get why Doug Ford thinks it's a hatchet job, but it's not. And Doug has not seen it. He said as much. I characterized his brother Rob as a populist, and I characterized Doug himself as a populist, and hell, Donald Trump is a populist. But Rob Ford was doing this before these guys did. But of the three of them, I mean, Rob Ford met his tragic demise. Donald Trump is perpetrating the tragic demise of everything that we seem to hold dear about our democracy. And Doug Ford, the populist, is now he's now come across as more of a common sense, reasonable, kind of, I can make mistakes and apologize. I'm big enough to change my mind. I understand that I'm not right every single time. And yes, I have my enemies, and yes, I will lash out at them. But then also I have this part of me where I have to understand that by lashing out, I can cause additional harm. So I'd have to say that of the three populists, I'm more of in the corner of Doug Ford, in that he's sort of evolved into being what I consider to be a reasonable first minister of a province, and it happens to be the biggest and most populated province in Canada, so this is kind of an important thing. And also, he has sort of taken on a mantle of Captain Canada, enough that it makes me wonder if he someday is going to seek the the position of leader of the Conservative Party and make a run for Prime Minister. I never would have thought that several years ago, because I usually, like, I viewed him as, just as I viewed his brother, as basically a joke. And but he has proven himself to be no joke. And hey, you know what? Doug Ford running for Prime Minister as the leader of the Conservative Party, I can think of a lot worse. I can think of Pierre Poilievre. I can think of just about every leader outside of Erin O'Toole that they've had recently, that I would, you know, if it was a choice between any of them and Doug Ford, it would be Doug, 10 times out of 10. Normally, I wouldn't go anywhere near a guy like Doug Ford, but I actually have voted for him because I felt that he was the right guy at the right time, and his work during, you know, the way that he led this province through the pandemic, I think was spot on, and that was something that was worthy of me making an X in the voting booth. Nevertheless, I'm not here to talk about Doug. I'm here to talk about Rob. And I encourage you to watch it. If you have Netflix, it's only about an hour long, I think. Maybe it's 90 minutes long. But it's definitely worth the 90 minutes if you wish to go through, you know, sort of take a walk down memory lane. Or if you just want to find out what the Rob Ford phenomenon was all about. But I can guarantee you it's not a piece that's just there to ridicule Rob Ford. Very fair-minded. It interviewed quite a few people that were part of his inner circle. The man's story is a tragedy. It's a human story. And I think it's one that, you know, no matter how you feel about a guy like Rob Ford, you can't come away from watching a show like this without learning an awful lot about some important stuff in life. So, thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Have a terrific weekend, and we'll catch up with you as soon as we can.